In this episode, I sit down and talk to Christian Harris. Christian specializes in slips and falls. You may have seen some of his posts on LinkedIn, and on a recent trip to London, I had a chance to sit down with him in person, and he teased an upcoming book, which I think is already out, and I'll provide a link in the show notes, and that is Prevent Slip Accidents with Slipology. I love that word, Slipology. That's a clever one. I wish I would have thought of that. But hey, that's what he does. Christian Harris specializes in this. He has a really fascinating story about how he got into this particular discipline of all the things he could focus on when it comes to, safety and health, and not just workplace safety, but public safety as well. How he landed on this particular topic, and he explains all that in this episode. He also shares some fascinating statistics and some tips that we can use. So you could take away these tips just after you listen to this podcast episode. You can go and look through your workplace and apply these tips as well. So without further ado, let's get into my sit-down interview with Mr. Christian Harris. Before we get into today's topic, I have one question for you. Are you still painting your floors for 5S markings, things like that? Don't do that. Head over to mightylinetape.com/podcast, a great partner in safety. They've been with us from the beginning. They have some really good products that are going to get you out of a whole lot of time, material, and maintenance and upkeep. Their floor marking tape is second to none. It takes up easily, doesn't leave a sticky residue. They've got floor tape with beveled edges for forklift traffic, carts, things like that. So it really holds up well to that kind of traffic in your facility. They also can do custom floor signs. If you have a particular logo or a message, they can make that happen. Get a free sample and try it for yourself. Again, head over to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Tell them that we sent you. You will get a free sample to try out in your facility today. Again, mightylinetape.com/podcast. Do you want to ensure you're compliant with OSHA standards? Do you wish there was a way to have a comprehensive safety audit without needing OSHA on-site? Well, how does a mock OSHA audit with a comprehensive, detailed report sound? If that sounds like what you're needing, the folks at Aero Safety can take care of you. Their mock OSHA audits include the whole 9 yards. We're talking administrative review of all safety training programs, written policies, procedures, and a physical walkthrough of your entire facility. To top it all off, the formal report they provide includes a detailed list of any deficiencies. Let's face it, we all have them. That includes pictures of those deficiencies and applicable recommended corrective actions to help you get on the road to compliance. If you'd like to discuss how a mock OSHA audit could help you improve your overall compliance and, more importantly, protect your workers, contact Aero Safety by visiting their website at aerosafetyus.com or by emailing them at info@aerosafetyus.com. Be sure to mention you heard it on the SafetyPro podcast, and you'll get 25% off your estimate. That's www.aerosafetyus.com.
All right, welcome to the SafetyPro podcast. I'm here with Christian Harris from Slip Safety Services.
Well done, you got it right.
All right. I'm over here in London, first time, and this is the first person I'm talking to, actually, besides my Uber driver.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, we're on LinkedIn, and we've chatted periodically, and I tried to get involved in some discussions you were having with your community.
Yeah.
It's just the time.
Too early in the morning.
Yeah. Or is it late? No, too early.
Too early for you, yeah.
Yeah. So, see, I don't even know what time it is.
You definitely don't know the time right now.
I have no clue. It was a long flight.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you about your story, about how you got started, one, with slip safety, but how you got into safety in general, because I know there's a story there.
There is a story, there is a story. So if you cast your mind back to 2012, it was the London Olympics, which was like a real highlight. And I live in London now, not too far from where we are, half an hour's drive. But at that time, I lived kind of relatively close to the Olympic Park. So I used to jog along the canal to the Olympic Park.
I see.
And so, close enough. And it was A Sunday in May 2012, the build-up for the Olympics was, getting very exciting. Long story short, I had a lovely day out with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we got married, our 10-year anniversary in a few weeks, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
it's been that long, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we went to this flower market, had lunch, had a nice walk, so on and so forth. We were heading home. We parked up our car in a supermarket, and we started walking to the front of the store, and then I've just got a total blackout for the next about 5 hours.
Really?
So we were walking, if you imagine like a T-junction, we were walking down the pavement or the sidewalk, as you'd call it, and a car sped around the corner at the bottom, lost control, mounted the curb and ploughed into me.
Just you?
Just me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were out 5 hours?
I was out. Yeah.
It's when you came to, where were you?
In hospital.
The hospital?
Drugged up.
Oh, wow.
With broke my collarbone, broke my wrist, broke my ankle. I got some scarring and neck damage, and luckily on my handsome face, there's only one scar, which is right in my eyebrow. So you can't even tell that's there.
But it's very distinguishing.
Exactly.
That's it. Yeah.
So before that I was a management consultant.
Okay.
And I was a bit disillusioned with that, to be honest.
Right.
I wasn't really loving it, and I was kind of thinking, what shall I do with my life? And I didn't really feel like I was adding much value to the world. And then obviously this thing happened to me, which I always say was very unlucky, but equally very lucky that it wasn't much worse.
Yeah. So sort of the way sometimes I hear stories like this that are similar. Folks get into safety through what at first would be a tragedy.
Yeah.
But but you were already, obviously you weren't thinking of safety.
Not specifically.
Before this.
Not specifically, no.
But you knew you wanted to do something else.
Something else.
Okay.
Yeah. So my wife's a lawyer, so I don't have anything against lawyers. I've got friends who are consultants, I've got friends who are bankers and accountants, and so there's nothing against any of those people. But I just wanted to do something a bit more than that.
Right.
And so, when this happened, I sort of got, as you would, quite interested in safety. So I started looking into safety and taking the management consultant's view of safety. So the trends, the data, and all of that stuff.
When this happened and you kind of made the connection to safety, what did you go through? This, why did this happen? How did this happen? Did the person not see me?
I actually never...
And kind of go through that?
I actually never tried to think too much about the accident,
okay.
Funnily enough. I never tried to deconstruct it, or I just put it down to, the lady that was driving that car clearly didn't mean for that to happen.
Right.
Something bad happened.
Yes.
And,
okay, good.
Let's let sleeping dogs lie,
Okay.
I didn't feel like
because I've talked to folks and they've expressed to me they had this need to try to figure out what went wrong, what and that process got them interested in safety.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, so that's good that you took
it
more
was
of
more
a
the human impact for me. It was more the fact that this
a holistic approach
thing
to
happened,
yeah,
and the impact it had on me, my wife, obviously,
right,
or girlfriend at the time, my friends, my family. Luckily, we didn't have kids then, so
right,
it was just the two of us, so that was a bit easier. But yeah, it just got me emotively interested in safety.
So how long were you in the hospital, and then how long for your recovery? How long of a period of time are we talking when the wheels start turning in your head about this?
So I wasn't in hospital very long. So I was in hospital for I think 2 nights, and then I went home for a few days, and then I went back into hospital, a different hospital, to have my operation, which was 1 night.
Okay.
So I've got a plate in my collarbone.
So wow.
Permanent reminder.
Okay. So going through X-ray metal detectors is fun, right?
No, it doesn't come up actually.
Is it titanium? Is it medical grade?
I always want it to come up, but never does.
Okay.
But it probably took me a month till I felt kind of even semi-normal, because I was on really quite strong painkillers and just resting a lot. And then I think probably after about 3 months, I felt pretty physically back to normal. And then it was, I couldn't put a figure on it, but it was sometime after that where the sort of mental side of things normalized.
You started to think about it.
Yeah, and also just the fear.
Oh, okay.
Walking down the road.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I hadn't even gone there yet. But
yeah.
So could this happen again?
Yeah.
Type of thing.
So I never didn't walk down a road.
Right.
But I was very on edge.
Yeah.
And I'm not anymore. It's been 10, 12 years, but I would say I'm more attuned to the speed of cars than most people are.
Do you find that's normal? I know we're going forward and backwards in time. You know, now having gotten into what you're into now, do you see that? Because I do see that. When I was in the fire department, and I see a lot of folks. That's very normal process, and we call it recency bias sometimes, where you're very tuned to it because it was very recent, and then as time, we naturally will cope with it better, or go, okay, it doesn't happen that often, I shouldn't be aware of it that much.
And that's the same reasons why these sort of health and safety campaigns, where it's like we're doing this campaign, now, and then we forget about it and we have an immediate impact and then things drift away. It's psychology and So I think there's something to that for sure.
Okay.
So it took me a good few months to sort of feel like I was back to normal again, I suppose.
All right.
But in the meantime, the wheels were turning. In the mind.
So why? So you were a management consultant.
Yeah.
I'm friends with a bunch of consultants as well. I did it for a decade. Yeah. What's that?
Commiserations.
Yeah. So I know. We used to joke a consultant is somebody who asks you for your watch and then tells you what time it is. But so there are different. You have to pick. I don't want to say you have to pick a lane, but the differentiator, like what separates you from other consultants. So with safety, I'm interested in, like, you didn't do pedestrian safety.
No.
You didn't do sidewalk safety, or what do you call it? Walkway, or
like road safety, I guess you call it.
Sometimes I feel like I need Google Translate.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. It's all English. That's what's funny. I'm just that stupid. So why slips? Like, how did you get to that?
So what I started to do was, think about, it'd be interesting to be in safety, and I've had this experience, and that's driven me to be, emotively attached to safety. So what's going on in the world of safety? And as I started looking into the data, so road safety would have been an obvious thing to look at, but actually the data there is a really good story, improvement.
Right, through design and laws and awareness, Yeah.
So we're doing a pretty good job there. Could I have done things to make that even better? Maybe. But actually, when I really started looking into it, slips, trips and falls, and I subcategorize that into slips, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but it's the biggest category.
Okay.
It affects the most people. It causes the most harm.
And not just in the workplace.
No.
Yeah, I know in the U.S., accidental deaths from falls or falling down off the job is huge. Huge. So you're talking about, you looked in the UK and Great Britain.
I looked globally, but I focus more on Great Britain.
Okay.
Because I wanted to make sure that, we weren't an outlier in all of this stuff. So, but the statistics are fairly similar wherever you go, I think.
Right.
Normally it's about a third.
Yeah.
It slips, trips and falls. So
it's around 30-some%, right?
Yeah. And it does vary by sector, but
I think it was 33. It's a long time ago. It's been a couple of years since I looked into this specific stat off the job. But it's a big one.
Yeah. So it's the biggest single category, but also it's a flatlining category. So if you look at the data year after year after year, it doesn't change.
Yeah.
So in other areas we're improving, and in this we're staying the same.
Yeah.
So to me, I thought, well, look, this is an area that is the biggest. So if I want to make an impact, it's the biggest area that I could potentially make an impact in, and it seemed to me to be an area that there was obviously room to improve, because otherwise we would be improving and we weren't.
Now, you said you were a bit disillusioned with management consulting, and this is exactly what a management consultant would do.
Yeah.
So it's funny how you've taken this approach of, I don't want to say analytical approach, but that's what it is. One, you started with this desire, this need to do something, to make an impact. But then you went right into, well, what's going to get, I don't know if it's Pareto or whatever you want to, label you want to put on it, but you were like, I'm going to analyze where I can make the most impact. So I love that. It's very interesting. Yeah. So you recognize this. So you started getting into it. Like, did you study it, research it? talk to other companies. How did you make that first step into this world?
Yeah, so quite a lot of that. I mean, I rapidly came across a business that was doing some work in this area. Not it wasn't their sole focus, but it was something they were looking at and interested in. And it was kind of somebody I met through somebody I knew, and so the kind of stars aligned.
Oh, okay.
And that's when I started getting my hands dirty in the field, shall we say. So that happened relatively quickly once I'd kind of got an idea of this is the space.
Right.
I want to get
then
into.
Then it's like, what can I do?
Yeah.
And there's probably no shortage of things you could do in that space.
Yeah.
So then it's picking like what's going to be most effective for now, and then building momentum.
And I think the thing with slips is that it's a much broader topic than people give it credit for. And so there's a lot you could do.
Yeah.
So it's actually trying to figure out, okay, where within this big category can we make the biggest impact, and trying to focus in on that. So, we do a lot of education and we do a lot of webinars and my own podcast and all of that stuff, lots of LinkedIn things.
So what's the name of the podcast?
Safety and Risk Success.
Safety and Risk Success. And it's available everywhere. Yeah. I've seen it. I've seen it when I'm scrolling on my podcast. So be sure to check that out. We'll put links as well. Website too?
Yep.
Okay. Same name?
There isn't a website for the podcast actually, but we've got slipsafety.co.uk.
Okay. We'll put a link for that as well on here. And, I do a lot of work with Mighty Line floor tape, and they do a lot of this. They do the grip tape and things like that, but also just, for visibility for 5S organization. But, people forget about just the visibility piece of it. How I noticed going through the airport, obviously a lot of international travel, right? And so I love the little sign that said walk to the left because I want to do North American driving rules and I'm walking on the right-hand side. So, I liked those visuals, and when they're crisp, clear lines delineating foot traffic and vehicle traffic, and they're easy to follow, you almost don't think about it. You almost gravitate right towards that. So I'm glad I'm partnering with Mighty Line Floor Tape on that. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you. I want to get a little more, get my head wrapped a little more around slips. So you said there's slips, trips, and falls. Obviously different categories.
They are, but obviously most people group them together. So that's one big mistake because...
why? Because we do that in North America. Slips, trips, falls is one category.
So and we do that here, even the HC.
Oh, okay.
The HC does that here.
All right.
I push against that because they're not the same thing.
Okay.
So if you've got a problem with people tripping, then coming in and looking at all the things you do around slips is obviously a waste of time. And vice versa. The one reason why it makes sense is that if you're doing, like, let's say you're in a retail store and you're doing a walk around to spot for hazards, then obviously if you're looking at the floor, then it kind of makes sense that you could spot for hazards for slips and trips. But other than that, I think they should be separated.
You could slip on a hanger. You could also trip on it. But okay, so let's get into what separates them. And why is it important? Like, if you were to recommend to me, it's important to make a distinction sometimes. Where would we make that distinction and why?
So, again, if we go back to the data, if you look at insurance claims data, for example, in the manufacturing sector in the UK, 38% of insurance claims are slips.
Just slips?
Just slips.
38?
38% are slips, 3% are trips. So it's an order of magnitude higher.
Trip meaning there's an obstruction,
an obstruction at a low level,
differential,
and you catch your foot in some way,
and trip,
and trip.
Okay.
So the scale of the problem is much larger for slips versus trips, and also in terms of the solutions and what to do about it, the scale of that is much bigger as well. So trips is relatively simple. And so one of the things I don't like is that when we bundle slips and trips together and we say it's simple, slips is not so simple. There's more science, it's more subtle than simple.
Let's get into some of that, because I know you offer a free tool as well, which we'll talk about. So, like, what makes slips more complex, do you think?
So a trip, as we said, it's an obstacle at floor level that you basically either don't see or can't get out of the way of.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a permanent obstacle, like a tile that's kind of raised up a bit, or it could be a temporary obstacle, like a trailing cable or something that people could move away. So, if you can tidy away things properly and do good housekeeping, then trips really shouldn't be too big a problem.
Shouldn't be an issue, right?
Yeah.
In that regard, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas slips, you can't really necessarily see the problem if you're walking along, because often, there might be the tiniest drop of liquid on the floor, and that's going to cause you the same risk as a big pool of water.
Right.
You might have, a floor surface where you actually can't see that it's contaminated or not.
Yeah. Or the friction has been reduced.
Yeah.
There's something we call, I don't know if you call F rating, the friction rating of a floor, where you take this instrument and drag it across and measure the. You could have worn that down over time from moving products across your warehouse floor or your factory floor. And you're right, you realize it, or dust. There's so many things that can impact slips. And okay, so now I'm thinking you're right. This is
there's more to it.
It could be a lot of different things you need to address.
Yeah,
not just one thing.
Exactly. So we've developed this model called CHIMES, which is an acronym for the 6 key drivers of slips. So the C is contamination. So if a floor is clean and dry, it's not going to be slippery. But if you introduce any kind of barrier between the floor and the foot, that's going to change the level of slip resistance. So what contamination is there? How much of it is there? How often is it building up? How much of it can we withstand? What can we do to prevent it?
Where's it coming from? What is it? Where's it coming from? What produces it?
So that's just one. That's one sick. And there's already loads of stuff we're talking about there. So what can we measure there? What can we quantify? How can we quantify it? How can we improve, etc. H is for heel. So that's all about the foot. Pretty obvious that that's going to be involved in slipping. One of the big misconceptions, though, around footwear is, a safety shoe doesn't necessarily mean it's got good slip resistance.
Yes, you have to look for that feature. Yeah. But then I also go back to contamination. I've had folks tell me in my past when I was consulting, so now you're giving me flashbacks. And it's traumatic as a consultant, a recovering consultant. Of folks saying, we want better shoes. And I'm like, why don't you just have better floors? Yeah. And they're like, that's too hard. Yeah. This place is a mess. That's too hard. We're going to put everyone in slip resistant shoes and not change the floor.
And that's
or
wrong.
The contamination, I should say.
Yes,
the first C.
And that's wrong if you think about the hierarchy of controls.
Right.
Whichever way you look at it.
So H is heel, it's the shoe. So it's making sure you have the appropriate footwear for the environment.
Where you can control it, because some cases you can't control it. So, we see, a shopping centre or a pub or a restaurant, someone slips, and the first thing the health and safety manager says is, well, of course they slipped. Did you see the high heels they were wearing?
Right.
Well, hold on a second. Your duty of care is to make your building reasonably safe for the reasonable use of that building. If you're operating a pub, it's reasonable that someone should be wearing high heels, and therefore you should
expect that.
Yeah, you should be making it safe.
And that's the human and organizational performance approach, or they call it HOP now. The kids call it HOP now. Yeah. You know who I'm talking about. And I remember, I'm in my 50s, so I remember when I was taught this, coming out of the 90s, going into the mid-90s, I was taught this approach of you should be able to anticipate certain human behavior. It isn't about accepting it or saying it's right or wrong. It's just, that's just what you should expect. Yeah. And anybody that's worked with, I would say, retail, restaurants, things like that, you have to assume like somebody's going to have one too many. Yep. Heels. Yep. No shoes. Yep.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and that ties in nicely actually with I in CHIMES, which is individual. So that is all the human factors. So again, even with this, right, there's demographics play a role. If you're an 80-year-old woman, you're much more likely to slip.
Right.
You're much more likely to fall, because we can slip and not fall. And you're much more likely to hurt yourself than if you're a 20-year-old man. Yeah.
The end result of those two exact same actions are different. Like my mother-in-law, who's had a hip replacement. Yep. And not picking their feet up as much as we used to.
Yeah. So there's
in
something,
our youth. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something about age. There's something about gender as well. So that's one aspect.
Okay. So individual.
Individual. So just this, we're still within individual. Okay. So there's demographics. There's behaviors or activities. So if you're walking at a normal speed in a straight line, that's one thing. But if you're pushing, pulling, twisting, turning, carrying, if you're rushing, if you're distracted, all of these things alter the likelihood.
You just described everything I saw in the airport.
Yeah.
Because you have some people just wandering around, standing, they're not in a hurry. And then you have some that are late for the next, and they're hauling stuff, and they're distracted, yelling at the kids to hurry up, and they're running and not looking. I mean, you have all of that in
So we need to bear all of that in mind in terms of what we can expect people to be doing. And then from the perspective of members of staff, because it's harder to control members of the public, but members of staff, right? So let's say we're operating a restaurant. Could we design our kitchen in such a way that the people carrying the dishes to the pass to the head chef are walking in a straight line rather than twisting and turning around corners?
Right.
Because if they're carrying stuff and they're probably rushing and they're twisting and turning, that's going to be more risky than if they're walking in a straight line.
And then you have to rely on the audible, like behind, corner, and you have to be focused on, that Michelin star, right? Quality food and processing all that other stuff at the same time, and that just increases the likelihood of errors.
Yeah. So that's another aspect of individual, and then the third one is all around the training, the awareness, the signage. Big questions about signage. So again, just in 1/6, there's actually a lot to break down.
Right.
M is for maintenance.
Is for maintenance.
So that's wear and tear, like you said.
Yeah.
Things change over time. If you go to St Paul's Cathedral in London and you look at the floor, it's a stone floor that's been there for years. It's going to have worn smooth, and it's going to have different slip-resistant properties than when it was installed. Change of use. So if you reconfigure buildings, move things around. COVID was a good example of this. So we had a lot of slips happening in places that normally they wouldn't, because people had hand sanitizers.
Yeah.
And so
they were using things that weren't there before.
Yeah, floors were getting contaminated where the floor beforehand was never going to get contaminated, and therefore it didn't matter how slippery it was. Now it's getting contaminated. Also, like the disinfection thing, leaving residues on the floor everywhere.
It did, yeah.
So that was another thing. And then cleaning. So, cleaning's a big minefield. I always use the analogy of two analogies, actually. One is, I mentioned it's my 10-year anniversary coming up. So wedding suits.
Wedding suits.
How does cleaning apply to a wedding suit? So, I don't know if you're married or not, but
yes.
Coming up for 10 years, I'm actually going tomorrow to a wedding in Spain, and I tried to put my wedding suit on. Now the jacket fitted me fine. The trousers, I could do them up, but I couldn't really wear them.
Oh no, they shrink over time, I hear.
Exactly. Well, yeah. Whether it's the shrinking over time or it's the I'm getting slightly fatter over time.
I'm going to go with the first one.
But the reason there's an analogy is that you don't go from like skinny to really super fat like that.
Yeah, there's a progression.
It creeps up on you over time, day after day, and you don't actually notice it. So in terms of cleaning, floors get contaminated, and if you're the manager of the facility, you don't notice them getting contaminated because day after day, you don't see that change.
It's so incremental that you don't notice it. Yeah. If it was night and day, you come in the next day and it's all of a sudden a mess, you notice it.
Yeah. And the difference of a floor being properly clean and sort of looking clean but not being that clean can be, 500,000x reduction in risk.
Wow. Okay. So having a good preventative maintenance schedule for the work environment based on the type of environment. Yeah. And then I would even go back to some of the other letters.
And the type of contamination.
The amount of contamination. Right. Yeah. And because a good PM schedule would anticipate those things.
So all of these things kind of intertwine a little bit. So that's a big topic.
So maintenance.
E is for environment. So that's about the weather.
Okay.
And like things like condensation.
Yeah.
But it's also about the built environment. So slopes and ramps, steps and stairs, lighting, noise.
The physical environment. Not the natural, not only the natural environment. Yeah. Okay.
Entrance matting is a big one.
Yeah.
So most stores have entrance matting. I don't know what it's like I've not been stateside for a few years, but here in the UK, you have these like 7-Elevens, like style stores.
Yeah.
They're not 7-Eleven here, but
convenience
stores. And they typically have like 50 centimeters of matting.
Yeah, okay.
Why does matting exist?
Well, it's supposed to be a walk-off, right? So you don't track in wet.
So if you've got 50 centimeters of matting...
Yeah, it's not doing much.
It's not doing much.
No.
So most places have woefully inadequate matting. So that's just one example. And then the last of the 6 is surface, which is the floor.
Oh, okay.
So we finally end up back at the floor. So obviously some floors are more slip resistant than others. How can we measure that? One of the big things like footwear is, you can have a floor that looks like it's anti-slip.
Yeah.
But it isn't.
Really? So do you have examples of floors that you see over here that you would think are pretty grippy?
Yeah.
But
so like in your day-to-day world, you probably have in your maybe some of your distribution center locations like checker plating, like the metal checker plating. So that
diamond plate we call it.
Yeah, diamond plate. So that looks like it should be.
Oh, that's pretty slick.
Grippy.
Yeah.
But if you pulled over, like we're sitting in a hotel right now in the lobby, if we stopped the next 100 people that came through the door and showed them a picture of that and said, "Is that anti-slip or slippery?" They would say anti-slip.
Because they see the texture.
Yeah, because it's got texture. So that's an example where it's being chosen because it looks like it should be safe,
right?
But it's giving a false sense of security.
Yeah, and there's a lot of surface area on a typical diamond plate that is smooth, and over time, it wears down.
Yeah, so often with those, when they're new, they're pretty good because you have a
sharper profile.
Edge,
yeah,
and then as that edge kind of
rounds out.
But some of them, even when they're brand new, they're still slippery.
Right. Wow.
But you can't tell just by looking at it.
Yeah, so they're sold as, but they're really not effective.
The same as the footwear.
Okay. Yeah. Footwear is a good one. Bathrooms are a good example of like we go form over function. We want it to look nice until you introduce that first shower. Yeah. There's somebody coming out and just goes, that tile floor looks great. Yeah. Yeah. Just don't get it wet in there, and it's in a bathroom.
It's in a bathroom.
So I see that a lot. Okay, so that's a great acronym.
So that's the model, yeah. So
and is it? Is it a circle? Is it a wheel?
I present it. I suppose I could present it as a circle. I sort of present it as like almost a semicircle.
Okay, good.
Just because visually that.
Yeah, visually it could be appealing. It can engage somebody. So. Yeah, and that's on your website.
That's on the website.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
And then the tool you mentioned is called the Slip Prevention Scorecard.
Scorecard.
So that's basically, it's a free tool. It's an online diagnostic. It takes about 3.5 minutes.
Okay.
It asks you some questions, and then it gives you a score for each of the chimes.
Oh, each of those categories. Yeah. So you can see how risky based on your inputs. Yeah. And then gives you where you'll know where you should focus your energy.
Exactly.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll have a link to that as well in the show notes. And if you're watching this on the SafetyPro Podcast Community site, it'll be in the comments section below. By the way, the video will be on the community site for anybody that's listening on podcast land out there for free. You know who you are. always doing the free audio.
Cheapskates.
Yeah, I know, but that's where I started. I started with the podcast. Yeah. I mean, you can't beat the reach you get with podcasting. Yeah. We'll have the link in the show notes there as well. So, when you said in this country, explain, help me understand. You said duty of care.
Yep.
That's a very specific phrase.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that it's also a legal reference to a legal mandate of some kind.
Well, it's interesting because the principle of the law regarding health and safety in the UK is one of reasonable practicality.
Reasonable practicality.
Yeah. So in the Health and Safety Act, it does say, floors shall not be slippery so as to expose anyone to risk, but it doesn't define what that actually means.
Okay.
Now, in the courts, it has been clearly defined. There's a particular type of testing and measuring the slip resistance on the floor.
We have standards we can... Yeah.
So it has been defined to that extent. So if you ever end up in court, you're being measured against this test. And here we use what's called a pendulum test to measure the friction of floors. And it's pretty much, if you score above 36, it's a pass, and if you're below 36, it's a fail.
And it's basically the friction that's present.
It's the dynamic friction present on the floor.
And we do have that in the States. Yeah.
But one of the disconnects is between, reasonably practicable. Therefore, we'll just put a sign out, or we'll just do this.
Is
or
that
just do
reasonable?
That, because that seems reasonable. Yeah. Versus actually what happens if you get tested in a court of law.
Right.
And so we haven't quite caught up with that yet. So I sort of have been campaigning for a bit more. I did an interview on my podcast recently with a lady who was chief of staff within a council here.
Okay.
For the Labour Party. So the Labour Party is sort of left of centre. Mm-hmm. And I'm politically slightly to the right of centre. Okay. Not very far right, but slightly to the right of centre. So I'm a bit more libertarian.
Okay.
And she's less a libertarian.
We're familiar with these terms in the States.
Yeah. So I'm trying to phrase it in a way that people understand. So, but it's interesting because although I'm more libertarian, I'm sort of in the world of safety. I think we should be a bit more authoritarian.
Right.
Because I think sometimes we don't do quite enough.
Yeah.
To set more, in these bigger areas where actually there are lots and lots of people getting hurt. I just think we could do a bit more to be a bit more rigid, and that would be helpful.
Yeah, I do. I do see that, even having been a small business owner myself in the past with a small store open to the public. That was my biggest fear, was the workers getting injured. And a lot of them, it was a frozen yogurt shop is what it was. So they were all younger, 17 high school kids. I did not want to have to call one of their parents, and they slipped in the kitchen back there. So I was like on it, right? As you would imagine, somebody like me being on it. But I also, the public, like I definitely, and that's why you said duty. I definitely had, I would say, responsibility that I'm inviting the public in. Yeah. I have to make sure it's safe for them to come in. Yeah. And so I was on the workers all the time. I hope I was a good boss. I'm going to use air quotes when I say that, scare quotes. But I definitely made a conscious effort to consistently send that message to them that you are the face of the company. When they come in, they don't care who I am. If I never come in, if I'm the owner and I never come in, you are the worker. Yeah. And so how the place looks and everything represents you. Yeah. And it was a big fear that I had, somebody coming in, getting sick from the food, slip,
or hurting
trip,
themselves,
stuff like that. Yeah. So it was very, it was nerve-wracking to have a small shop that served food to the public and had workers. And I think everybody should own a business or do something like that at some point, because it does
give you a different mindset.
It gives you a whole different perspective on both sides, by the way. Like, and that's where I come across workers still today, and they go, oh, management this, management. I'm like, they're people. Just like, they probably started doing what you're doing and worked their way up. What are you talking about them? We're all in this.
Yeah, and if you have your own business as well, it gives you a better appreciation of risk.
Yeah.
So my podcast is Safety and Risk for a reason, because I actually like talking about risk. Because I think risk is sometimes seen as a negative thing, but actually it should be seen as a positive thing. Yeah. Because actually, to set up a business, to expand a business, to, start a new line or whatever, you've got to take some risk. And it's about managing that.
And you also have to anticipate. It's almost like a FEMA, right? A fault mode event analysis you're doing. You're basically saying, oh, if I'm going to do this, this could happen. So this is what I need to do, and this is what I need to have. And it's a good exercise in managing risk. There's nothing is risk-free.
No.
And so more often than not, we're trying to manage it down to an acceptable level. Yeah. And that acceptable level could be driven by any number of factors. My personal beliefs, the law, expectations from the customer, demand from the customer.
Yeah. I watched a really interesting, there was I think it's called the EHS Congress in Berlin recently. Big conference. I didn't go, but I watched one of the talks there by a guy called Drew Ray, who's an Australian
I'm not familiar with that now.
I don't know if he's a safety practitioner or if he's a researcher, but anyway, he was talking about how actually much of what we do in safety, and this really resonated with me in my field of slips, much of what we do in safety is not actually about making people safer.
Oh, yeah.
It's about reducing anxiety.
Yeah.
And making
getting
people
comfortable.
Feel comfortable.
Yes.
And it's not actually about, doing what we should be doing, which is reducing that risk.
Yeah, so I agree with that. And how as soon as you said that, I was like, exactly. One of the most popular questions, and I've asked people this, I've asked managers this, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah.
That's a level of discomfort.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to make you a little more comfortable with that thing and put some things in place, and then just stop at that. I think there is this fear of on all sides. Somebody says we could always do more. It's like, yeah, you could. The question is whether or not that is significantly reducing in an appreciable way risk further, or is it just on making us feel better and it's not really doing anything, and our energy could be better spent in another area. That's tricky.
That is tricky, yeah.
And you got to have conversations from top to bottom and everything in between, because you can't just have somebody at the top decide. You got to get everybody involved, those that do the work, those that are exposed to the products. But I think you're right. I think the myth of we're going to eliminate risk altogether, zero risk. But then some people will use that on the other end and go, oh, well, then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Save some money.
Yeah. But that's why I that talk really resonated with me, because that's kind of the way he put it across in such a way that it really made sense to me. But it's kind of the approach I've been taking in my field. So what we do is all about, in those 6 areas, measuring stuff that actually does physically reduce that risk.
It's quantify.
Yeah, quantify it.
And it's not just my emotions.
No, and there's a lot of talk, about LTIs and all these other KPIs that we can measure, the lagging stuff, and how you can fiddle the numbers. And of course, we know we shouldn't be focusing on that, and we know that data maybe isn't the most reliable. For me, it's about figuring out, what are the real inputs that will make a difference,
right?
And tracking those, and then the back end stuff should take care of itself.
I mean, you're right. I've had this conversation too in the States with the lagging indicators with OSHA and lost time injuries. I'm like, well, I can almost wipe out all your lost time injuries. You just pay them.
Yeah.
Pay the workers. There's no lost time.
Yeah.
The injuries still happen. The underlying drivers are still there. The conditions still exist. The risk is still there, or gone up now because now you know about it. But you wiped out your LTI. So I always try to caution folks around, like, we got to pay attention to those only because our regulators want us to report that. But we have complete control over how we respond to these things and what we do about them. That they just want to see the results. It's performance driven. We get to do whatever we want.
And fundamentally, obviously, we're all working in safety because we want to make people safer, and so we need to have that end result in mind. But we need to make sure that what we're tracking there is the real number,
and we're counting what matters. So I love that. I love the acronym CHIMES. Right, it's plural. And you can measure every one of those things. And then you can get a score. You can get a risk score if you do this 3 to 4 minute investment scorecard, and then you'll know where you have issues. And that's interesting. Okay. So how long now have you been focusing on this problem with slips?
Like 12, nearly 13 years.
So it's 13. That's right. You said the Olympics. Okay. So it's been since then. And you primarily focus on the UK.
Yeah, predominantly. So I advise people around the world.
Okay.
But in terms of, we have a sort of diagnostic. We do 3 things. We do diagnostic stuff, consulting, advisory. That can be done anywhere because those principles are universal.
Right.
We do sort of remedial work, That's more tricky to do because
you got to physically be there.
We're physically there doing stuff, and then we do a maintenance programs and kind of ongoing assurance and compliance stuff. And again, that's more. So that's pretty much 99% at the moment. UK focused.
Yeah.
Because we've got boots on the ground and the team here in the UK to deliver that. Obviously, the principles and some of the stuff we can recommend, can be implemented around the world by anybody.
Yeah,
with
that's what I'm thinking of, especially with leveraging the podcast platform. This stuff is universal. I mean, people walking on a surface isn't exclusive to some country.
Everywhere.
Yeah,
it happens everywhere. Whenever I've looked into the data, it's the biggest cause of accident, injury, and claim. In every country. I'm just soon going to be publishing a book as well.
Oh, there you go.
So,
I just did my second one and I hated it.
Yeah,
I absolutely hate it. And the reason why I made myself do it was because I'm really good at extemporaneous speaking. Give me a topic and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'm very conversational. The idea of writing a book scared the heck out of me.
Did you use like one of those kind of like Otter? Have you heard of Otter, where the transcription thing?
Okay, so my first, this is funny, the first book I did, Rethinking Safety Culture, it was based on a 3-part series of episodes I recorded, and I dropped the audio into I can't remember what I used now, and all it did was transcribe it. And then I had to rewrite it all and then organize it, and then I expanded on it. And then for the second book, I did the opposite. I had the concept, and I said, I'm going to hold off recording. I'm going to write it out because I don't use scripts or anything on my podcast. So I wrote it out, and that was hard for me because I'm just not built that way.
Yeah. So I used Otter, which is this app, it's a free app.
Otter,
Otter.
Otter, Otter, Otter.
Otter.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I've never heard of that.
So you put it on your phone, and so what I would do is I would just go for a walk, and then I would be talking,
monologuing. Yeah.
And then it would transcribe the whole thing, and I would obviously like go off in different directions, and then that would be the first draft of different chapters or different parts of chapters.
All right.
And that for me was a better way of doing it than sitting down and trying to write it all.
Oh, I hated the second one because I knew the topic and I knew what I wanted to say because I talked about it not on the podcast but with colleagues. Okay, so I'll have to try that.
Yeah. So so that book should be out soon, and then I've already got.
And it is all about slips.
It's called Slipology.
I like that.
Yeah, Slipology.
You got to trademark that.
Science of
Slipology.
Preventing slips.
There you go.
And I've got my idea already for a second book, but I'm not going to.
Okay, so any ETA on when Slipology is going to come out?
So I'm aiming to get it out for September.
Okay.
Because every September I do a little campaign which I call Sliptember, sort of play on words. So I have a real focus on slip prevention in September.
That works.
Yeah, it works, and it's a good time of year to do it because
you're going into the cold season,
the colder
wintry,
and the wet season. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, see, it's perfect.
So I'm going to try and do it for them.
Okay, that would be good. Let me know. We'll do. We'll have you back on.
Yeah.
And do like a book launch and announce it, and to everybody in the States that cares to listen, we'll do something. We'll do something cool for it, and have a link on the website on our stuff. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, Christian, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming all the way out here.
I mean, it's a much shorter journey for me than you.
Yeah, I know.
You've come several thousand miles.
Yeah, we had, it was almost 4 hours delay because of weather out of Charlotte.
Right.
And then finally took off. So the rule is, with the FAA, is I don't know, is it international? I know it's in the States, this rule, is that if you're going to be on the plane for more than 4 hours, they have to allow you to get off the plane.
Right, okay.
And so before we pushed back, he said, it's only been about 3 hours, 20 minutes or so. He goes, but we're going to go past 4. So anybody that wants to get off now, I'm giving you a chance to get off now. And nobody got up. Right, we're like, well, no, I got to go to London. Like,
yeah.
It's not like I'm going to go catch the next plane in an hour.
But hopefully you'd get some compensation for that, would you? Or?
Not weather related. No, I mean, what are you going to do the weather? I mean, we've tried controlling it accidentally, but that doesn't work. I don't know. It's like, no, they don't. I did get an upgrade though.
Oh, nice.
So Not because of that.
No.
They needed to balance out the plane or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I think they call it.
They came right to me though. This is a huge plane.
Yeah.
It was a 777.
Yeah.
And the flight attendant's coming down the aisle, looking at aisle numbers, and then looks and I'm at the window, three seats. I'm at the window. Yeah. She goes, Mr. Hoffman, and I went, oh no, what did I do? It was that last tweet, wasn't it? That I don't. I'm kidding. I don't get in that kind of trouble. But she goes, "Would you like to move? We need to move somebody up."
Yeah.
And it's in the I was already in the bigger seats,
premium,
the bigger seats.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Get me out of here! I'll go up there."
Yeah.
I slept the whole time.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that's good then. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did get an upgrade, but I don't think it was weather related. I think it was.
Yeah, just luck.
We would have been flying lopsided. I don't know how that works.
Well, that's because your wedding suit has got so much smaller over the years.
I've done okay, and I've got you beat by, I don't know how, you said 12, no, 10 years married. Oh yeah, so 17 years on you. Oh, nice. I've got 27 years this year. So I'm slightly larger than my wedding.
Than you were, yeah.
Slightly, just slightly though. So I do okay.
And the camera adds £10.
It adds all of it, I think. And it does. So it also adds space, which is weird because we're sitting really close right now, but the camera does add space, which is weird. All right. Thanks again, Christian.
Pleasure.
We're going to put this out for everybody on the podcast as well as the SafetyPro Podcast Community site. So if you want to see the full video, the link will be in the show notes. Go ahead and check that out as well. And all of Christian's links to all the stuff we talked about will be there as well. So I highly recommend you go and do your scorecard for your facilities. If you have multiple facilities, remember, they could all, even if you make and produce the same thing in your company and you have multiple locations, I guarantee you those different locations have different problems.
They'll all be different.
Yes.
And if you've got an estate, so we're doing this with the NHS here.
Oh wow, okay.
So thousands and thousands of sites. So you can do a really good risk scoring exercise. It's very quick and easy, but actually you can start to identify what are the commonalities, but then also where are your outliers, so where are your most risky sites based on the self-assessment scorecard, and then you can obviously do whatever steps you need to in those areas. You know what? We're never going to end this episode because you just reminded me of something. I actually had a discussion with somebody recently when they had 12 sites and they rolled out this campaign, and about 8 of the sites pushed back and said, why are we doing this? And then the feedback was, well, because we did an assessment and across all of our sites, these are the top 2 issues. And he said, no, you averaged that. We don't have this. Yes. It was the biggest issue at the other sites, and we didn't have it. Yeah. So I like what Christian's saying is, be careful, avoid that average monster, right? And when you average everything out and distribute them equally across your sites, you could be forcing people to do things that don't need to do, and that hurts safety. Yep. It does. Yep. It's like they don't know what they're doing. Yeah. Generally, if you want to, can I swear? You knock yourself. If you want to piss people off, put the word safety in front of another word, and then. Okay. He said he was going to swear. I don't think that's a swear word. Is that a swear word? It probably would be considered a swear word in the UK. In the UK, it probably wouldn't be for you guys. No. Oh no. No. Okay. See, you're. Well, I can drop an F-bomb. He's a good guest. He's a good guest because he said, "Can I swear?" And then he said like a PG. Yeah, so that's PG a good one. Yeah. There you go. All right. So, no, I've had some guests get a little blue. A little fruity. Yeah. You got fruit? Yeah. Okay. There you go. With the language. So yeah, be aware of averaging that stuff out. So check out the scorecard. Do one for every site. Ask somebody at each of your sites to hit that link and fill it out for themselves and see what they come up with. Very useful tool. Thanks again for being on with me and driving all the way out here. No worries. All right. Thank you. All right. There you go, folks. If you want to see the full video of this interview, head on over to the SafetyPro Podcast Community site. Share your thoughts, your comments, questions over there as well. It's free to join, but if you want to comment, then you're going to want to become a premium member. That's the SafetyPro Podcast Community site. The link is also in the show notes. Be sure to check out Christian's LinkedIn profile.
All the links are in the show notes. But also, go check out his book, Prevent Slip Accidents with Slipology, and let Christian know that we sent you. And we'll talk to you on the next Safety Pro podcast.